Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give about 2 or 3 minutes. We got back late from the cash board meeting today, so you can hear the whole crowd coming. Give them about 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. You want me to put this one on?
Yeah, that should be working.
Okay. I'm not. Okay, we're going to get started. I think we've waited long enough. We got the important people here, right? People that showed up anyway. When I put on this lapel mic today, I got to tell you just a story to start off today. Lapel mics are dangerous for me. Here, last time I used a lapel mic, it was at our Next Gen Symposium. It's not working? Well, then it's not working. Hello? Technology back there? Now can you hear me? I got to get really close. At least I don't hook it on, because here's the story. I have a lapel mic on, and we're doing an all-day symposium, right? And I keep the lapel mic on, and without taking it off, I walk out to get something to eat, and I didn't turn it off, right? So all of a sudden, Greg Golick comes running out the door, literally running. Don, you got the lapel mic on, right? Luckily, all I said was, I really like that croissant. I didn't head to the restroom or anything. So I'm a lucky man, really, but lapel mics don't mix with me. I'll try to remember not to do that this time. Welcome to the CASH membership meeting. First thing I'll do is first-time attendees, our new members. Anybody new to CASH this morning? Great. Can you introduce yourself and where you're from? Okay. Okay.
Gerard with SKW Architects, Stafford King and BC. I'll be heading up the educational studios for them, both K-12, community college, and higher ed.
Okay. Thank you for introducing yourself and welcome. Anybody else? All right. I just to notify everybody out there, we are broadcasting this meeting live. I'm going to do a better job of remembering when people ask questions. I'll try to repeat the question because I've had that. Actually, I got a couple emails. The last couple meetings, I haven't been doing that, but we'll remind you to, repeat your question, or I will, so the people out that are watching this, there are actually people do that, they get the question along with the answer. Okay. Well, then, I got to almost chew this thing.
There are empty seats up here.
That's pretty much what you have to do.
You do? Okay. You guys make me feel like an English teacher again. Nobody sits in the front row. All right. Today, SAB meeting, really, really important meeting I want to remind you about. They're considering recommendations on the proposed grant agreement, and just as important, or maybe more important, the true unfunded list and the acknowledged list, right? Those are important items for us that have, sometimes millions of dollars on your acknowledged list. If you can be there, we have a group of people that are testifying, including myself, So hopefully we can get that going. I think really the important point is right now that I can share with you is we've done some good work. We have support from CSBA, AXA, and the Ed Coalition for moving forward with Prop 51 implementation. So we're creating momentum, I think, legislatively from Ed groups, and that's a really important point. The meeting today, the reason I think it really is so important is we met with Senator O'Donnell, or it's not Senator, but Assemblyman O'Donnell this morning. He's a huge supporter. We feel like we have the momentum to get, there's that option 2 that would look at the acknowledged list and the unfunded list as kind of one and the same. We think we have the momentum to get that. I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but that looks positive. Hopefully today we'll get that approved so we can count on those acknowledged list projects going forward. The next step is, of course, to get bonds sold. And we'll work one step at a time to fulfill the will of the people and get these projects funded so we can take care of kids and take care of teachers and get them in the best situation possible. So just some events to remind you about. June workshops. The registration for our June workshops is open on the CASH website. This should be a really great dynamic workshop on the partnership with School Energy Coalition. So there's one on Thursday, June 27th in Sacramento, and one on Tuesday, June 27th in Sacramento, and Thursday, June 29th in Ontario. Networking mixer and happy hour, so our outreach to people to keep the CASH mission moving forward. Thursday, June 8th, 2017. Open bar and appetizers. It's sponsored by Ranu Clark, Leadcore Construction, and W2W Sport. So please join them if you're in the area. And then just a little plug for our fall conference and pre-conference workshop. That will be October 18th to the 20th, 2017 at the Duke Hotel in Newport Beach. So save that date. Got to go forward. There's that information. And the next is our CASH weekly update. Email goes out, so check your inbox on a regular basis. A lot of good information in that. And I've had a few inquiries about our website, and I guess the polite way to say it is, we want to make some improvements in that. Get it really kind of the 21st century and how websites work for people. We want to improve that. We've let the staff know that, and they're working on some great ideas to make the CASH website improved and better in the future. So that's something we'll be previewing in the future for our CASH membership. Okay, state agency updates. The first one up. I saw Mr. Yeager here, Fred Yeager from the California Department of Education.
And now we're going to change the batteries in that.
Great idea.
So we can see if that's maybe the problem. Do you want to do over now that there's batteries?
Sorry, man.
Is there Is it back on? Test 1 2 1 2. Can you guys hear it now? Yep.
Okay.
All right, you just got to hold it real close to your mouth. Okay.
And then here you go. And I'll take that, sir. Thanks.
This is requires a lot of dexterity. So, well, good morning. Don't have a lot to report today, but a couple just informational items. We've been working or collaborating with the State Water Resources Control Board on advertising and outreach on the availability of the water testing by your local water provider. They do have a map on their webpage with a number of districts that have requested the evaluations. It's listed by county. So take a look at that. There are some counties where there hasn't been a lot of action. So if you're in one of those areas, take a look at that. Maybe that's something to pursue for that free water testing of up to 5 locations per site, I believe. Let's see, what else? The deadline for the charter school facility program is today, I believe, and one of the things you have to have for I believe it's a new construction or rehabilitation, is the CD recommended acres. For those of you handicapping the game, that we've received about 175 requests for the acres calculations. So how many of those would translate to applications, it's hard to say, but that's certainly probably 3 to 4 times what we would have received in the last cycle. So probably a lot of interest out there. I think that's all the real news I have. If there's any questions on anything, continue to submit your preliminary plans for our review. Look at our webpage for resources on research on the importance of facilities, some of our guidance documents, so, PE planning, pipelines, all those good things that are there. So any questions? Or barely got a chance to sit down, Don. I don't know, you're gonna have so that's it.
Okay, legislative and regulatory updates. With Prop 51 taking most of our time, there's still some important issues going on that we need to hear about. So Ian Padilla, Rebecca Searley from CASH are here to talk about those issues. And it's not Searley, that's my old friend from Modesto. You pronounce your name?
Curley.
Curley, Rebecca Curley. So I have an excuse.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, good morning, everyone. I can't tell my husband how to pronounce his name and his family, so it is not intuitive. Good morning. We are at a really fun and exciting time in the legislative process where we've got a lot of action happening on multiple fronts. One of those is work that's being done on the budget, and the other is work that is being done fast and furious on legislation. So on the budget front, right now we are working towards a June 15th deadline. That's the deadline whereby the legislature needs to pass a budget and send it to the governor for his action. And right now, currently, the conference committee is working. So what they do is they reconcile the actions that are taken in the 2 separate houses of the legislature. So the Senate and the Assembly are putting together their own versions of the budget. Any differences on those items between the 2 houses go to the conference committee where they work out those differences and then bring the same budget forward to the floor in both the Senate and the Assembly. They're also working on finalizing and negotiating trailer bill language. Trailer bill are bills that implement policy changes in the budget. So we do have a couple of school facility items that are in conference committee. One of those is Proposition 39. I will not scoop Anna, our energy queen, and we'll let her update you on what's happening there. We've also got the DSA fee increase, which is in the conference committee being discussed. And the last item, which I want to spend just a little bit of time on, is the audit trailer bill language. So as you know, the governor proposed to move the audits of school facility program projects to the local level. That would be brand new scope for your auditors. There'd be a lot of kinks to work out there in the implementation, which we're well aware of. But we do want to make sure that you understand that CASH does support this move in concept. We do have some recommendations that we believe would help make that more workable and more successful. And the biggest of which is the Department of Finance version of this language had an automatic payback provision. So if you had ineligible expenditures, which would be audit exceptions, those would be paid for using a withholding from your next Prop 98 apportionment. This is a change from current policy, which allows districts to decide whether they would use their capital dollars or their operational dollars to repay any ineligible expenditures. So CASH is asking that rather than make that change and require operational dollars to be used, the trailer bill language be updated to reflect current law. It does look like we are, fingers crossed, hopefully going to be successful in that area. The assembly version of the language does make that change, and it appears that they're poised to adopt that version plus a couple of other tweaks. So we're excited about that prospect. couple other concerns that Cash had were related to the applicability of these new provisions. We were encouraging the legislature to apply the new audit requirements only for projects that have their construction contracts signed after July 1, 2017. The language that's in the trailer bill actually says that you would have to abide by the new requirements for any projects that are funded after April 1st, 2017. So essentially everything on the unfunded list and the acknowledged list at this point. It looks like we may not be getting there on that point, and that there's a holdout on this point in the administration. So stay tuned. Cash is supporting the assembly version of the trailer bill language, though, since it does fix the payback provision. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, bills, I'll talk about a couple, and then Ian has a few that he wants to update you on as well. We just had a really big deadline in the legislature, and that is the House of Origin deadline. So as of last Friday, all bills needed to move through their House of Origin, so either the Senate or the Assembly, pass off the floors in those houses in order to continue being active in this year. And to give you a sense of how important or not important this deadline is, just anecdotally, I heard that there were only 3 bills on the Senate side that did not pass off the floor. They were all related to environmental issues and business concerns. So it seems like a really important deadline, and it is. We have to move through this point in the process. But in reality, there aren't a whole lot of bills that make it to the floor in the first house that die on the floor in the first house. You'll probably see a lot more deaths and a lot more significant amendments in the second house, so stay tuned. One of the themes that we're seeing very popular this year is dealing with accountability and transparency in local school bonds. I know I've spoken to you about a couple of those bills. Want to give you a quick update on where some of those are. There are 2 bills that are aimed at requiring additional information on your anticipated tax rate for local school bonds. And both of these bills were kind of asking a question about, can we add some additional information to the ballot label, the actual language that voters see on election day? Cash opposed that approach because that is very valuable space that you all use to tell your communities about what those bills, what your bonds will do in your local communities, and using up some of those 75 words with a tax rate statement, or even a statement that says, go read your voter guide because there's information about your potential tax rate increase there, is not a valuable use of those 75 words. So both of these bills have passed out of the Assembly. One of them, we actually were able to negotiate some amendments that allowed us to move to a neutral position. So that was AB 1194 Dababneh. We worked closely with the author and the sponsor, which is Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, to remove Cash's opposition. Originally, this bill was doing a couple of things, including updating those ballot label requirements and also adding a new chart with assessed valuations and anticipated tax rate increases to the voter guide. Instead, we were able to negotiate that down, no new ballot label requirements, and instead there will be an additional calculation in the tax rate statement. Right now, there are 3 different items that you have to identify related to the tax in a year. There's one additional one that would be added that talks about the estimated average annual tax rate increase and the final year in which that tax rate increase would take place. We felt like that was a reasonable compromise, and so that's where we landed. We're still opposing the second bill in this category, and that's AB 776 Harper. It is still a holdout on adding to the ballot label to say, hey, go read your voter guide, so we're opposing that. One where we want to report some additional good work is on AB 1253 Cooper. This is the bill related to bond oversight committees that would have expanded their role and also created a new role for county offices of education, who, at the request of your Citizens Oversight Committee, would have been required to do a review of the relationship between a school district and their financial services firm if that firm had made a campaign contribution. So this one did die in Appropriations Committee. I think we're helping to tell a story about this is no longer really an issue given where we are with the participation that financial services firms either have or don't have in this process at this point. But it did die. It was one that Cash also opposed. Any questions about any of those or any other bills not related to water or energy? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So as Rebecca indicated, I'm going to talk to you about some of the water bills that I've talked to you about before, but it's a good time to get an update because they have changed. Some of them have fallen off and so on. So just for the purposes of review, there was over in January, or actually in February, when they started introducing bills, there was over 20 bills on water and lead and associated issues. Now, we knew that not all of those would go through, and we were looking, of course, to chase the ones and work with the authors on the ones that were most significant, and we certainly have found those. We're watching the other bills, but we're putting more energy into the ones that are more significant, obviously. Those bills are essentially AB 885 Rubio, AB 746 Gonzalez Fletcher, and SB 210 Leyva. And what all of those bills at different levels take different approaches to it, but they share some common components. One, obviously, is the focus on essentially potable water, right? Drinking fountains and kitchens. Also, the testing, they all require testing to be done, which is somewhat obvious, and a lot of districts are already doing that. But the key question there is, what is the threshold for testing, right? The U.S. EPA standard is 15 parts per billion, but in various bills and at various times, they've moved that around. One of the bills, AB 885, moved it all the way down to 1 part per million, which basically would trigger just anytime there's water flowing in California, it would probably trigger. Mercifully, that one has went away, but that's something that we're still watching. And then kind of the big and the expensive question is, if once you do testing, and if it shows an exceedance, exceeding that 15 parts per billion, what is required to do? Do you have to shut off that plumbing? Do you have to install filters? Some of the bills required that. Do you have to replace the offending plumbing, so to speak? And of course, that's the expensive option, and that's one of the areas that we were most concerned about. And so, at different levels and in different ways, all of these pieces are floating around in these different bills. So, first of all, kind of the good news, AB 885 Rubio was held in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, one of the few that was. That is significant because Cash and other school organizations pointed out that the component in there that would have required replacement of the plumbing was exceedingly expensive. And so that's one of the reasons that it was held in the Appropriations Committee. So the new bill in the Assembly is AB 746, Gonzalez Fletcher. They were kind of parallel bills, and the authors worked together. Now Rubio is a co-author on the Gonzalez Fletcher bill, so they're working together on it. So that one has gotten better, but we still have concerns. But basically what that bill does is it requires testing once a year on all campuses. What is it? Built January 1, 1993. It requires notification if there is an exceedance, 7 days to notify parents and guardians. Now, one of the key pieces is that if an exceedance happens, it requires that the system be made inoperable, not to be replaced. So that is an improvement between the two. And then there's some other technical pieces on that. So it has gotten better, but it's not something that we're supporting or opposing, that we're working with the authors on it to see if we can make it better. Then finally, and on the other side of the house, you notice the two I've talked about so far are in the Assembly. The lead bill on water and lead in the Senate is SB 210 Leyva, and previously to its the most recent amendments, it required essentially US EPA current standards. And so we didn't take a position on that. We thought that was, of all of the bills we were talking about, the most reasonable. For instance, LAUSD already uses that. Some of the bigger districts do that. We were concerned, of course, about some of the smaller ones, and we're raising questions about that. But what it does now, that has essentially been amended out, and it requires, this is new, so I'm going to quote this, it requires the State Water Resource Control Board as part of the Safe Drinking Water in Schools program, the one that Mr. CDE just told us about. It requires establishing additional priority criteria for awarding of the grants. So in other words, if you've done your testing, if you've been leading a little bit, you will get priority for those grants. Again, the grants, $9.5 million worth of grants to help you out with that. So again, at the halfway point, at halftime, the bills have changed. They've gotten better, but now they're switching houses, and so we're still going to continue to chase them around. But we are encouraged that both of the authors, particularly in the Assembly, worked with school districts and were responsive to our concerns. As you can see, one of them was held, and some of the more onerous pieces, like the plumbing piece, was amended out. So. We will continue to bird dog these bills, and if you ever have questions about them or anything like that, definitely give me a call. Our fall maintenance workshops will focus heavily on these because it's a big component, and we're getting a lot of questions about it. So, unless there's any questions about these? No? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ian, I've just had a comment about the lead testing. Clovis, as you probably know, is really near Fresno, California. And Fresno, in the north part of their city, it was almost a year ago, has an issue with lead in the pipes. That is a city issue. And it was interesting to me how the schools got brought into it instantly, right? So if you're at a school that has to be in city water, politically it happened very quickly. So I would just add that comment that as this thing becomes more prevalent in communities, that be prepared. Be prepared for how you would comment on it. Prepare your board, your superintendent, on how the district's position would be taken to be empathetic about the situation without committing yourself to millions and millions of dollars of construction costs. So I think it's a touchy issue that we need to be prepared for. DSA couldn't be here today. Chet Whittam couldn't be here, and I guess the deputy couldn't either. But if you haven't heard, they are proposing DSA fee increases. I've met with Chet Whittam personally and kind of listened and heard the rationale. And we had a conference call. The Board of Cash had a conference call with Chet on the same issue. My comment before I ask Dr. Duffy to give you some details is that anytime an agency proposes fee increases, I think it's very important that they share their rationale, in a detailed manner, the why behind the what, especially when it affects projects. And even though it might be a small amount for the big project, it's still going to be funds that take away from the project, right? Take away from what we're trying to do. So I think the rationale needs to be solid. Cash has a neutral position on it right now until we learn more about it, but I'll have Dr. Duffy come up and give you a little update on that.
Good morning. I'm a lobbyist, and therefore I'm supposed to tell the truth, right? And that's all I can do. So I'm going to give you the truth, and that is what I know, and this is going to be stated neutrally. I don't represent DSA. I represent the Cash organization. But just to remind everyone, DSA is the building enforcement agency for schools, public schools in California, and it's been that way since 1933. And we pay DSA, we in schools pay DSA a fee for the first type of review that they began doing after the Long Beach earthquake in 1933, and that's the structural safety review. So there's a fee for that. There's also a fee, and by the way, that fee is controlled by statute. So the agency cannot increase the fee if they chose to tomorrow or whatever. It has to, if there's a change, it has to happen in statute. Another fee that is paid by districts is the fire life safety review fee for the building's fire life safety components meeting code. And the third is access compliance. So those three fees are paid for those three reviews done by DSA. What I'm going to talk to you about right now is a proposal to increase the structural safety review. And I talked to you about this last month, I believe. But it's in statute, and there is a trailer bill. So this is in the budget process, not in the policy process, going from committees like the Education Committee to Appropriations and other committees. It is in the budget review process, and it's a trailer bill that identifies an increase in the fee for the review of structural safety plans by DSA of schools. And we asked the state architect if he could give us a breakdown of what those fee increases would mean for three kinds of projects. And we chose $1 million and $10 million and then $100 million. And I'll tell you what those are in a moment. The fact that this is in the budget process with the trailer bill means that it may not be common knowledge to those of us that are working in schools and aren't here today or don't attend cash events. So it's our purpose to make sure you're aware of this, and that the districts that aren't here today and weren't here last month will hear about this. So we'll be communicating this out via our cash communications resources, just so everyone knows. And as Don said, we have a neutral position on this at this point in time. But this is what the fee increase would mean for a project that would be $1 million project. The application fee cost would be $12,500 under the proposed rate. The current fee is $7,000. For a $10 million project, the current fee is $61,000, and it is with the fee increase, it'll be $102,500. Currently, it's $61,000. For a $100 million project, it would increase from $601,000 to $1,002,500. So we're seeing substantial increases with this proposal. Now, what do we know about the status of it? We know that in the two conference committees, both in the Senate and the Assembly, they considered this. We've had communications with staff to those committees. Those committees have dedicated staff, and we've had conversations with them. And they've asked a number of questions. And some of those questions have been, when was the last time there was an increase? DSA says it was really some time ago. I don't remember when the last increase was, but I think it was in the 1980s. But what we do know today is that when the Senate and the Assembly determined what to do, the Assembly supported the request of the administration to increase this, and the Senate did not. So this is now an issue in the conference committee that includes the Assembly and the Senate. What effect does this have on your projects? Well, and Julie Arthur says this very, very eloquently, when you have a state-funded project, you have a project that is funded by the pupil grants. Where do the fee costs get charged to? They get charged to that pupil grant. Do the pupil grants get increased regularly? They get increased once a year based on the CCI by action of the State Allocation Board. So with this bump, if you're talking about a $10 million project with the bump that I talked about, there is no bump in the pupil grant. There will be, we expect an increase in January, sometime in January when the board takes action. But there isn't anything specifically to this cost. This is a soft cost. The CCI is looking at construction cost. So that disconnect is something that is an issue. And I think articulating that issue is something that's important for us to do. But we wanted to bring this to your attention because it is important. Somebody that like Jenny Hanna that's going to be building a $100 million or more high school is going to see an increase that is going to be about a 45% increase in that DSA fee. There is no corresponding proposed increase for the other fees that I mentioned to you. This is only structural safety fee. Any questions on that? Yes, Margie.
Well, where's the justification for that? You know, when we try and charge, developer fees, we've got to do a study and justify exactly where that money's going. What's DSA planning to do?
So Margie, you're asking, where's the nexus, right?
Where's the rationale?
So what DSA says is that since about 2004, 2005, they've had an increase in the cost of their personnel, these are salaries and benefits, by about 45%.
Back to the podium, Tom, so we catch your audio.
Oh, sorry. Is this okay? Back up there.
Back behind.
Okay.
I know.
I don't like podiums. So that's one of the things that we are told. The other that, and this is always the go-to comment, and it's a reality, Margie, and that is that DSA is a fee-supported agency, so that they are not paid out of the state general fund. They're not paid out of bond funds like OPSC is. They are a fee-driven agency, and so the fee-driven agency is saying, we're not getting enough in fees to cover our overhead, therefore we need this increase. By the way, this isn't new in terms of the comments that we've heard from DSA. Probably over the last 4 years, I've heard this from the state architects several times, that they are basically operating in the red, and what they've done is they've had an increase, or not an increase, they've had a repayment of borrowed funds from the administration. When under the Schwarzenegger administration, there was a borrowing of what I would call surplus fees. That borrowing has been paid back, and so DSA says we're going to be running in the red if we do not have an increase. Julie.
So, and I understand, Chet made it very clear, not increase since the 80s. But what we could, and since they're fee-based, they're percentage-based. So when I built a school in 1996, it was $6 million for an elementary school. When I build an elementary school now, it's $30 million. So in reality, they did get an increase in their fees to cover that, just because it's percentage based. And so with everything, it's not like we're paying them the same amount as I would for an elementary school 20 years ago to what I pay now.
So and I don't know if everybody heard Julie, but Julie basically said this isn't a flat fee that for every project it stays the same. That in the 90s, she built elementary schools for $6 million. Today, it's $30 million, and therefore there's a corresponding increase in what DSA has for that review. And that's an accurate statement. I agree with that.
So I guess going back to what Margie's saying with the nexus is, obviously there was an ability to build a surplus until about 2008, and then that surplus was borrowed and went away, and now they're reusing that surplus to offset a delta in what their fees are versus what their overhead is.
So again, Julie's pointed out that if there was a surplus before, then there had to be some reason for that surplus being in place. And so maybe the fees, I'm assuming you're thinking maybe the fees were a little too high for that because there was that cost acceleration we saw in construction in 2003, 4, 5, 6. And I think, again, that's an accurate statement. What the state architect told us is that there's language that they put into this proposal to identify that if indeed a surplus begins to accumulate, that there is an automatic reduction in the fee. That was the response to those comments.
Reduction or reimbursement of the fee?
No, a reduction. A reduction. But that's a good point, Margie.
Yeah.
If you don't get reimbursed when your project doesn't go forward, you never get any money back. You only pay more.
It's like giving money to your children, Margie. You never get it back. There was another question or another hand in the air, maybe. No? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, if they're increasing 50, 60%, is there any commitments around review times? Helping with that? Is it all
I don't represent DSA. No, let me No, that's a good question. So let me tell you, if the state architect were here, he would tell you what he told the cash board and I when we were on a conference call with him last week, and that is that they are intending to commence on July 1st a new process that I refer to, he doesn't, but I refer to as the binless process. That they will not have projects in the bin any longer. The intent is that the architect would call ahead by 6 weeks and make an appointment with DSA and identify that they are bringing in their project at that time. And what Chet says is, I know what architects do because I am an architect who practiced at the local level, and I used to make an appointment, or not an appointment, I used to drop in a dummy set of plans, and then later I'd take in the full set. And Chet is saying, since I know people do that, what I'm saying is make the appointment 6 weeks hence, and during that time finish your project so that everything that DSA looks at, not necessarily landscaping, but everything that DSA looks at is complete. So access, compliance, fire and life safety, and structural. And that's part of, I think, his response to what we're going to do to make things better. Tova.
So Tom, we're actually the guinea pig on this process. We did it in May with down in San Diego office. So we're the first district to do this, and we made our appointment. And in order to do that, we said you absolutely have to have a full set of plans for everything the DCA looks at. Again, not landscaping and things of that nature. So full set of plans that are ready to go, and he will commit to you on that day when they will get it back in order to give us, the architects, a month to fact check and get their comments in. And then we came up with a date of, for example, September 15th was the drop dead deadline date to get it approved. So it was about a half-hour meeting, a little longer, maybe 40 minutes. Probably a typical meeting would be less than that, like 30 minutes. We had all of our players involved. It was a really good process. It was just exciting because we knew everything that was going to. We came up with dates. We did everything we were supposed to do, and we're hoping to get it out even earlier.
So what Tova is saying, and we've heard this also from DSA, but not in that kind of detail, is that there are commitments that are going to be made to you when you meet the commitment to be there with a complete set of plans 6 weeks hence. The penalty, by the way, if you do not have them complete at the time, is that they say you go to the back of the line and you start over again. You have to make another appointment 6 weeks out. Thank you, Tova, for that. There was another question or a raised hand?
I had the same question as him, the gentleman.
Okay. All right. Any? Yes.
Are they going to reconcile the fees at the end to get to change orders with their new proposed increase?
Tom, that's a good question.
Because I paid them $1 million for a $100 million high school. I'm sure as hope they wouldn't penny pinch me for some extra painting we did.
Or what if it came in under? What if it came in at 80?
Yeah, and this isn't a new issue. We've had these discussions with DSA in the past about reconciliation.
Because they've been getting a fee increase off the reconciliation for the past couple of years as it is.
And change orders upward, they make sure that you cover that. And that's part of what you need to do at closeout. And I think part of the discussion that we've had in the past has been, well, what happens with the closeout process since we have to pay you an additional fee to open, and if there's something else that I need to do, is there going to be another increase? I think those are all good questions, and I don't have an answer for you other than that they've been discussed. All right, anything else? All right, Don, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. You can see why I asked Tom to be the messenger on that one, right? He took it, and that's it. There'll be a lot more discussion on this. I really appreciate the questions, especially the one about, okay, if you get a fee increase, then how's your service going to get better, right? That's what we need to hold them accountable for and get a good rationale, as I mentioned earlier, a rationale of why and how they're going to improve their service. Okay, we have an annual conference. It's going to be larger than ever and better than ever. So Julie's going to give us a little update. Julie Arthur, Palm Springs, and our CASH Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. It's still good morning, so thank you everyone for coming here. Mine's just going to be very, very brief. The deadlines for all the workshop and roundtable submittals was May 26th. and we received over 150 submittals and proposals for those. So we're still going through those. We actually are not going to be having a planning meeting after this, our meeting today. What will happen is, depending on what happens with the SAB meeting this afternoon, if they set a meeting in June, we'll probably have it at that time. If they don't set a meeting for June, then we'll go ahead and try and do it by conference call. And we're still fishing out our meeting with our strand chairs and co-chairs. So as we move forward on that. Other than that, that's kind of a quick update. So you'll be receiving an email after the evening, after this evening meeting with SAB to let you know if we're going to have the meeting in June or not. So other than that, you'll be hearing from us on a conference call. So any questions on the annual planning? Quick enough? We can talk about DSA some more? No, not really. Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, school energy update. Anna Ferrara. Is she just outside, Greg? Not here. Okay, we'll have to get that next month because I'm not sure. Tom, is there anything that you don't update on?
You mentioned earlier that our workshop this month is on ZNE and it's a joint workshop with SEC.
Dr. Duff just pointed out that workshop we mentioned earlier on energy use will be a good one to go to get an update on all those happenings. So next up is, I think, Mr. Walrath. Is he here to do the California? No, Josh Jorn is here. They just took a trip to Washington, D.C., I think in April, May. So Josh can give us an update on that.
All right, thanks, Don. So if many of you are aware, we've been going back to Washington for about 20 years. Not myself, I was in high school back then. But I have been going back to D.C. for the last 7 years, current chair for the last 2. We had a spring visit in the beginning of May, heavily attended. Of course, we're continuing our discussions on various forms of legislation and the traction that they're taking in the 115th Congress. We met with members of Congress, both majority and minority party, House Ways and Means, and the House Committee on Education and Workforce. They were some fantastic meetings this year. I always say that every year, but we did have some really good meetings, some really good discussion, again, with the majority party in particular. We discussed the current status of the QZAB program, its success stories in California, and its current allocation. I believe at the time we had about $100 million left in the state of California, but it seems to me that was already committed to projects. So back in February, H.R. 960 was introduced in the House by Congressman Kelly, who's a Republican. This would allow for tax-exempt private activity bond financing, and it's currently in the House and Ways and Means Committee. While we were in Washington, we went over a new proposed bill that was proposed by Bobby Scott, and it now has a name, which is Rebuild America Schools Act of 2017. This would invest in $100 billion in public infrastructure and create over 1.9 million in new jobs. It would do so by creating a $50 billion grant program and a $50 billion tax credit program. It would also develop a comprehensive national database of school facilities or infrastructure projects. The bill would also revitalize the E-rate program. Now, we all know that a significant spending bill brought forward by Democrats may not happen in this Congress, but the Trump administration is talking about infrastructure. And I think a lot of the positive meetings that we had surrounded that conversation in particular, which is that schools are part of our infrastructure. The tone is changing both in the majority party and in the minority party, and it seems to be shifting to include schools as infrastructure. So stay tuned. We'll see how that develops. CSF and our lobbyists, of course, continue to monitor these efforts, and we'll keep you posted. If you have any questions, please email myself, Dave Walrath. We've got a large group of folks that attend every year, and we'd like to see that group grow. So with that, any questions? No? All right. Thanks, Don.
Well, schools as infrastructure, that's something that I think we want certain people in California to understand that as well. So that's good. That's good news. Thank you for the update, Josh. To finish up here today, before we I'll close with a reminder about the SAB. Is there anybody that has any jobs in your district that you'd like to advertise? This time, free press, free publicity? Okay. Just to close today, again, the SAB meeting today, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, really important meeting for Prop 51 implementation. And I just remind everybody that to testify from a district's perspective, you know, Tom has taught me is really important and really valuable. And I would say that what I've said before, as a district representative, know your number, know how many millions of dollars are at stake in your district, and know what's at stake for your kids and for your teachers. And if you can say that, and if you can say that often, and the more we do that, the best chance we're going to have to implement Prop 51. And I see a question from Tova.
John, can we just remind all the districts out there that the priorities and funding letters need to be submitted after, so tomorrow, the 6th, the 7th, or the 8th, or your school district will not get money. So just if you could reach that out. They did not change the dates of the priorities and funding, but they changed all the dates of the meetings.
Okay.
So just remember, try to get the word out. We don't want anybody to lose out on that money.
So the message is, and correct me if I don't get it just right, because I think it's important, but after today's SAB meeting, starting tomorrow, you need to get your letters in for your priority and funding round, right? Because the date of the SAB meeting changed, and I guess in statute or in that regulation, it's after the SAB meeting is when you need to submit. So I got that right?
June 8th.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your support. Have a great day.